The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
It's going good. I've been looking forward to playing this game for a while, partially because I have some exciting nostalgia goggles for it, but also because I have a vendetta against games that try to challenge me. So
yeah, it's I've seen through the way that you move through the universe that you do not care for being challenged.
No, people should know better, but. but what happened in this specific case is I was like, hey, I want to play Sonic Spinball for the next game. This is, I don't know, 6 months ago as of the time of this recording. And you were like, yeah, dude, totally. And then I went off to play my copy of it because I'm an old Sonic nerd from way back, right? So I had it laying around. And then after a week, you were like, I thought I had this game in my collection and I don't. And like an idiot, it didn't occur to me to just say, oh, surely Sega has released this on every modern console because they don't make consoles anymore and you don't have to go find a cartridge. You could just get it in for the Switch or the PlayStation or probably for friggin' calculators at this point. And and I didn't think to give you that advice until this time when I was like, I want to play Sonic Spinball. You need to go out and purchase Sonic Spinball. Here is an easy way to do that. And so we finally are playing Sonic Spinball, which is super exciting.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, no, you I remember just, saying I don't have Sonic Spinball. And you're like, are you absolutely sure? And if I remember correctly, I sent you a picture of my collection, alphabetized. And I'm like, do you see Sonic Spinball? And you're like, no. I'm like, well, then because it's one of those things, and if we're just going to get into a tangent, let's just do it right off the top. It's very interesting about the way that we, because it's a knee jerk to say I don't have thing A. It's are you sure? And it's do you want me to check again? There's a very finite number of things I can be looking at, and it's really, I really thought that you had that, and it's just you're basically exclaiming disbelief, but it does kind of come across as no, I'm not. I'm not so incompetent that I can't look at 17 things and say this is the one thing we're looking for is not a subset of the 17 things I am looking at.
Yeah. Well, and especially, I feel like I would recognize a blue hedgehog running away from a round Eggman, right? It's not like I'm looking for a specific kind of screw in a giant bowl of screws from different projects in my garage. It's this thing is distinct. And actually, speaking of which, so this, I was doing my little little tiny bit of show notes we do, and I was like, oh, November 1993, that feels about right. I would have actually thought a year or two later, but I was like, no, I guess that feels about right. It's just that I went back to this game a lot in my childhood. But here's what I disagree with. What is the name of this game?
I mean, I'm going to say Sonic Spinball, but I feel like that's wrong.
It's Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. And here's the thing. In the Wikipedia article, because this is the closest we get to doing research, right? In the Wikipedia article, it says Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, commonly abbreviated to Sonic Spinball. And I was like, because that's what it's called.
Yeah.
If you look on the box art, and I mean, I know you had to get it for the Switch, right? So if you look at the original box art, or even on the cartridge where it's way smaller, it's Sonic Spinball, and the hedgehog is it's vertical and it's scrunched in there. It's why? Why did you... Yep. Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball sounds dumb. Sonic Spinball still sounds kind of dumb, but it's a little bit less dumb to where it's forgivable. And it's just I had this moment of crisis because I was like, I'm going to have to type the name of this game into our website for the podcast. I'm going to have to put it on the file. We're still running the YouTube channel. I'm going to have to put it over there. And I was like, I don't want to put the wrong name, but no one on Earth has ever called this game Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball.
It's literally the reason that you're saying all of this just to like justify it, so that way we don't get like actually in the comments, where people are just like really, like Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. That's just a dumb thing to call. It's like, no, that is actually the name, and that does sound like something from like Parks and Rec, where like John Ralphio says like he does like this huge rhyme and then he ends it on the off rhyme. It just sounds like somebody walking up to you and saying, have you played Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball? It's like, oh yeah, Sonic Spinball. It's like, yes. So when I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, and you're like, why do you keep saying that? It's like, oh well, that's the actual name. It's Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. No, like if you not for you prefacing this and you miss out, I would have slapped at you that.
Yeah, no, but I wouldn't do that to you because it feels like cheating, right? Like
it is. It would be a sad slap. Like you would like slap me, but like you would slap me, but somehow your face would hurt.
Yes,
yes,
my the face of my heart would hurt because it's not fair. You know what it is? It's like going up to someone who is maybe not American, since Americans now think this is very funny to say this, but it's like going up to someone and being like, hey, that big green guy with the bolts in his neck? What's his name? And they'd be like, Frankenstein. You'd be like, it's Frankenstein's monster. You're so stupid, right? Like it's that kind of like, yeah, you're technically correct, but you know what? He's Frankenstein. This is Sonic Spinball. What are your nostalgia goggles for this game?
My nostalgia goggles for this. All right, this is just definitely one that I played on and off throughout just being a kid. I definitely own this one. And it was just a great game because for me personally, I was and still am terrible at it. It was a really great one to play with like friends because your cycle time wasn't that long, before you die. So
well, but if your friend is good at it, their cycle time is hours.
Yeah, exactly. But we were all terrible at it. So, we would just like plug it in and just, I don't think we ever got past level 1. In fact, I'm pretty confident that we didn't, because when I got to level 2, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then got really frustrated as like my skill wall, I hit a hard skill wall and then promptly gave up. But yeah, so that was my nostalgia. This was basically the equivalent of a coin op for us, where we had like 50 cents to our names. So
yeah, and I mean we'll get to how unforgiving the game is in that respect, but I mean it's a pinball game, like it's Sonic themed, but it has more in common with pinball games than not, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But
which were actually illegal for a little bit. Back in the U.S., back in like the early 1900s.
They were considered gambling. Do you know how that got overturned?
No, actually.
So it's kind of a like almost ridiculous story. Like I'm sure there's a Lifetime original movie about this somewhere, but this guy, I don't know if he owned a place that had like an arcade that had pinball machines or something, but he went into the court and said, if this was a game of chance, then I wouldn't be able to determine my outcome. And the judge was like, yes, that's what a game of chance is. And he was like, so if I can play this pinball machine in front of you and call all of my shots, then it's not a game of chance because I am determining what is happening through skill, not through luck. And the judge was like, that stands to reason. So they brought a pinball machine into a court in New York, and this guy literally played pinball in a courtroom in front of a judge to prove it was a skill game and not a gambling game.
And then it was funny because like there was this musician like up in the gallery, and he said like, that is just amazing. And then somebody leaned over to him and said, he's deaf, dumb, and blind too. He's like, man, that deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays a mean pinball.
Oh my God. Okay. You know what? We're okay.
Just gonna end the episode.
No. Okay. I'm going to derail the episode to tell you a story.
Oh. Sweet.
Okay.
We haven't even gotten to your nostalgia experience yet, man.
No. And that's the great tragedy of the story I'm about to tell you. Because for literally 2 weeks now, since we decided we were going to play this game for the episode, I was like, you know what? Very early on, George is going to have to ask me what my nostalgia experience is. And I wonder how much of the opening of Pinball Wizard I can get through before he stops me. Because I even had a way, like a clever way I was going to wrap it up. Because I was like, if he lets me get all the way through to that deaf, dumb, and blind kid, it's almost the exact right number of syllables to say that Dr. Robotnik sure plays a mean spinball. And I was like, I have been dreaming about this for days.
Dude, I'm kind of sad that I robbed you of it. Like,
well, you know what? It's fine because the fact that you made that joke means you would have immediately caught me, right? Because the first line is, ever since I was a young man, I played the silver ball. And you would have been like, that's the opening to Pinball Wizard.
Yeah, no, I would have, right when you said like I played the silver ball, like I mean we played a lot of Rock Band, and that was one of our go-tos.
Oh yeah,
so, but
yeah. No, I mean,
anyways, what was your actual nostalgia experience?
So this was a Sonic game, which means I owned this game because I didn't have a huge library as a child, but I filled it with Sonic games. I remember this game being really hard, but also super short. There's only 4 levels, right? So it's super short, but
if you ever get to see any of them.
Well, that's the thing, is because it plays more like a pinball game than like a platformer, there aren't tons of extra lives laying around and continues and stuff, right? Like when you die, you're done. So you get your 3 balls, and then if you haven't gotten enough points to earn another Sonics, then you're done. So I remembered this game being super hard, but like, you know, through sheer nerve and perseverance, like getting through and stopping Dr. Robotnik. But I don't have a lot of memories of that. What I have are a lot of memories of the first level. So I'm pretty confident that what happened is a handful of times I like muscled through the game just because it was like important to me that I beat it. But that most of the time that I sat down to play it, I was basically just playing the first level on repeat, right? Maybe the first 2 levels on repeat. Because when I got to the 3rd level on this playthrough, I was like, my like reference file for this level is noticeably thinner, right? Like the first time Harry in the Harry Potter books goes to what's his name, the like groundskeeper guy, like goes to his office and he's got like all the
Groundskeeper Willie.
What?
Groundskeeper
Willie, yes. The first time Harry gets off of the Starship Enterprise and goes to Groundskeeper Willie's office
to claim the one true ring.
he sees
from Dumbledore Calrissian.
He sees all the files for like all the kids who've gotten in trouble, and the Weasley twins have an entire drawer dedicated to themselves, right? They do the same thing in The Simpsons, actually, where Bart has an entire drawer dedicated, right? Because it's a simple visual gag, but like that's how it felt, is like the first level had an entire drawer of memories, and then the second level had like most of a drawer, and then the 3rd level had like a couple of, you know, faded photographs and some hastily scrawled handwritten notes.
Looked like the an old espionage folder from like the 60s, from the birth of the CIA, you know, like just
a lot of paper clips and stamps.
But yeah, so top of the hour visuals.
Yeah, so I struggled writing my notes for this part because I was trying to be a good criticizer and critique the visuals.
Also a fantastic linguist.
Yes, my second hobby. But I wanted to
be fair, you're better at it than your first. Oh,
you suck at everything is what I'm saying. I wanted to critique the visuals on their merit, but this game was either designed or published by a different company or a different part of Sega or something, which is why Sonic doesn't look right, because he doesn't look right. He looks really not right. And everything else in the game universe is very early 90s Sega. There's a lot of grunge. There's a lot of things that look just kind of like wet and dirty and rusty and crappy. And I actually really appreciate that about Sega games, because they weren't afraid to go for that like 90s grunge look, whereas Nintendo was more like bright solid colors, like, you know, more Sunday comics, and those are both good, but like I appreciate that Sega was like, no, we're not going to try and imitate Nintendo, we're going to go way over here. And so the game looks...
Sega does what Nintendo don't.
That's right, they do. Genesis looks dirty and gross. That's not a great tagline, Al. I think you need to work on that some more. But they had this look, right? You can look at a game and you can basically immediately identify it as a Genesis game. And this game looks like a Genesis game, but Sonic specifically looks wrong. He looks so wrong. And because he's in your face the entire time, you're dealing with that for the entire time. The only redeeming quality is that most of the time he's in a ball, so you don't notice how wrong his proportions are, how wrong he moves. Like his stopping animation is wrong, his ducking animation is wrong. Like everything it looks like fan art, right? Because the quality of the art is not bad, but that is not what Sonic looks like. So I like the graphics, but I hate them.
Yeah. I mean, it's odd to kind of compare it to fan art, because I don't think there's a whole lot of Sonic fan art out there.
No, really, definitely not on DeviantArt, and you should definitely not Google that on your work computer.
Yeah, well, while your boss, while describing to your boss this awesome podcast that you listen to. Yes, no, and I'm glad that you said something, because like, for me, not being the huge Sonic fan, I'm gonna go with fan that you are, I didn't like. It felt uncanny, you know, where like I wasn't able to point to it and be like, no, Sonic looks wrong. It's just like, it just seemed, you know, where I was just kind of like, that looks a little different. Yeah, it's probably just me. It was like kind of like being in a horror film with like the uncanny, where I was quicker to doubt myself than I was to doubt that Sonic looked weird or wrong, because I was like, that looks weird. No, it's probably just a trick of the light, you know? And then like Sonic turns into it and eats me.
Well, it's the children's doll that's haunted, and you're like, man, that children's doll certainly should not look that way.
Yeah. And so basically one of the things I have for visuals is, you know, and I don't know if this belongs in visuals, but you know, is that somebody said like, oh man, we need a new Sonic game. What are we gonna do? It's like, well, Sonic's in a ball all the time. You want to do like a pinball game? It's like, that's a good pitch, Al. Like, let's go with that. And also, thanks for showing up for the second joke. You're doing a lot of legwork in this particular podcast, and I appreciate it. But I wrote that down as like that makes sense visually, because like, you know, like they would like look at it and say like, okay, you know, like it makes sense. But then I thought about it, I was like, no, they just realized when they play tested Sonic 2 and saw how much time people spent on the Casino Nights level, where there was a small pinball mini game, and that like people sunk their lives into it, to the point where I am confident that in Sonic 2 I died on that level several times because I ran out of time. Yeah. They were like, what, we could probably make a game around this.
Which actually, to tie it back to an earlier tangent, that pinball game was gambling, because when you bounce off the flippers, it pushes you into what is essentially a slot machine. Yes. So yeah, that one would not have gotten past that judge in New York.
No, it would not have, because you know you're paying to enter, but it's random chance. It's almost like a loot box, you know. But but actually legally, as long as you can't pay it back out for legal tender, then it's not gambling.
Oh, Jesus. No, I think you're probably not wrong. Because to say that anything that is a ball could therefore be a pinball is not a reasonable, right? Like nobody looks at an apple or a beach ball or soccer ball and it's just like, oh man, this makes me think of pinball. A sphere is a fairly common shape in nature because of how gravity works. So
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's how we test physics experiments, is with spherical cows in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. I know that reference, but it's still so freaking obscene. It's just like, but anyway, like you're probably not mistaken that someone thought like, oh, isn't it funny because like Sonic's like in a ball all the time, like we can have like little pinball flippers in the casino night level. And then somebody else was probably like, I would do this all the time. I'd make a whole game that was like this. And then someone else was like, would you play a whole game like this if Sonic looked hideous? And they were like, well, I'd rather not. Well, he's going to. And somehow that's how they shipped it. But visually, like I'm going to keep complaining about how he looks, but like there's super high level of detail, right? Like everything looks really good. The backgrounds are like super detailed. Like they didn't phone in any of the visuals and make it look like an arcade machine, right? Like it's still, even though you are playing pinball, it still feels like you're in a world, like you're in some kind of gigantic pinball structure, not that it's a pinball that they painted blue, right? And I think that matters to the overall feel of the game.
Yeah, no, I think that they kept they did a good job layering the Sonic aesthetic on top of the pinball mechanic, which is that, there was no point where I was just like, there was no point during the main gameplay where I was like, I am just playing pinball. It didn't feel like I was in an arcade playing like a pinball game that was like Sonic, or like I remember, when you go to like the arcade and there'd be like the Terminator 2, the pinball game or whatever.
Yeah, there's Star Trek and Lord of the Rings. There's actually a Mario pinball game. There probably is a Sonic pinball game somewhere.
Yeah, so it didn't feel like that. It did feel like, you were Sonic in the thing, except for when you played the bonus level in between levels, when you actually, and that blew my mind a little bit. So in the level in between the levels, you are Sonic playing an actual pinball game
that is Sonic themed.
Like, yeah, that is Sonic themed. So that did feel like playing a Sonic themed pinball game within a Sonic themed pinball game. And that broke me a little bit. Like, I think that's kind of why I couldn't get past stage 2, because after that I was like, I don't even know. I feel like Pinball Serpico. Like I'm in too deep and I don't know like who I am anymore,
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, and I'm on the fence about whether we should talk about this in mechanics or visuals, but I'm going to at least bring it up now, and we will probably end up coming back to it in mechanics, which is this game. I'm going to guess, I'm going to shoot from the hip, but I feel like technically, like technologically, the entire game is in memory all the time, because if you move too quickly, or if there's one too many sprites on the screen, because everything looks wet and shiny and slimy, and there's just animations constantly happening, everything is moving all the time, the frame rate for this game just grinds to a near halt, right? And the hit detection is like not amazing. So, and because the frame rate is so bad, sometimes like you can clearly see parts of Sonic like passing through walls or passing through the flippers, and it doesn't look good. Like it makes the game way harder to play mechanically, but it also looks terrible, which is really frustrating, because my guess is that the entire stage has to be in memory all the time because of how quickly you can move from like one end of the stage to the other, right? Whereas like in a platformer, you're not likely to just suddenly be at the last, 20 feet of the stage when you just loaded the level, so they can kind of like lazy load stuff in. But in this, you can, like, there's warps, and there's, sometimes the flippers just send you flying, and there's like some of the stages are like really tall and narrow, so you can actually literally physically travel almost the entire length of the stage. And just every time the frame rate would like slow to a crawl, I was just like, and then I would die because it's like catching up with itself. And there's actually an interesting question, because you played it on the Switch. They fix any of that? Because on the original cartridge, It's broken as hell.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to say. Is I was like, I didn't experience any of that garbage, so
God.
they must have updated it, because I actually felt that it was pretty clean and responsive, and it's interesting because I remember everything you're saying is true, because I know the music for this level, like the first level where it's like do 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 do, and I remember that going like do 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 do, like I can remember that music too, which would be when the frame rate's grinding to a halt. So I'm like, the fact that I can so clearly hear that music like slowly dilating out, I'm like, ooh, yeah, no, that sounds right.
Yeah. Although you should know you were definitely just singing the casino night music, and I will slap at you on that.
No, I'm really sure you're right on that one. Anyways,
yeah, you're right. It's and this leads me to believe that for technological reasons, they were like, okay, we need a lot more data to be in memory all the time than we would normally do. And the Genesis just kind of can't handle that. But then because you're playing it on disproportionately more powerful hardware, right? Many generations later, it's like, oh, this is how they envisioned the game playing.
Well, and also too, you could just always get a Sega Mega Drive, get the Sega Mega Drive, the thing that fits in the thing. And then you put the other thing in the thing, I
do.
The Sega Mega Drive.
I do.
It's the super.
I do miss
super
the
popular
era of plug things into other things and then put those things into the first thing. Like,
yep.
Right. Because that's how, like, oh, I have a computer that's only got USB, but I have a PS2 mouse. And it's like, oh, we'll put this thing on the thing before you put it into that thing. Or like, oh man, this game's really hard. Okay, we'll put the game into this Game Genie thing, like clamp it in there, and then put that contraption into the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. No, put the Game Genie on top of the Nintendo cartridge, and then shove all of that in, and then push it down a little, and then shove something else in there to keep it halfway down, because that's how you get it to work, right? Because everybody had their own little voodoo to get the NES to work. But yeah, I'm confident that if you had played it on the proper console, the Sega Mega Drive, then
I'm just imagining some designer thinking like the way like a grand architect of an ancient civilization might think. Like they're designing Sonic Spinball and they're like, not today, but one day. One day, people will see my vision as I dreamed it.
And that's what actually happened with the Mayan calendar, was when Sonic Spinball could be played in all its glory.
Actually, you're only off by a couple of years.
But not bad for the Mayans. But anyways, the one other little visual note that I had, which was that I know what they were trying to do, and I think that they failed, where they've got the little like text and stuff scrawling across the top, right? And that is super not helpful,
But it's trying to be.
It's trying so hard to be the hero, and it's just failing so miserably. I mean, it is Man of Stealing failing that, like, but you like that. Anyways, so but no, so because basically at one point I was like, what am I? Where do I go? What do I do? And it was like, it just like, I saw this thing flash across the screen. I was like, wait, what? And then I saw it flash again. I'm like, oh, it's telling me quickly as it flashes across the screen intermittently, when also relaying to me my score in a game where I am very rarely looking at it because it requires me to be constantly looking at the screen.
Yeah. No, and they further Skinner box you because it's they also put like jokes up there. So like you'll go through a little warp and it's like sewer warp. And then there's like the little sewer warp thing. There's like a little tongue animation, like it ate you, and it's like, haha. But they teach you, right? Like the poor rat pushing the button, just desperately trying to get food over and over. They teach you that you need to look up there for the information sometimes, but who knows when, right? So then you either have to build the skill of constantly darting your eyes up there every time you see it flash, which frankly is unreasonable because it's a pinball game. There shouldn't be... It's a perfect information game. Like pinball is a game where you should have all of the information you need to play the game of pinball, but because there are objectives you have to accomplish to get to the boss and then defeat the boss, sometimes it's like, oh, you need to go over here, or like, oh, you need to press this button to make this door open so that you can go to get the Chaos Emerald, which will unlock the boss room, right? It just, there needed to be the little box of scrolling text should have been score and jokes. And then when you needed to go somewhere, they should have done like the Final Fight style, like finger pointing, like a big white Sonic glove, right? Because everything's very dark and grody. So like a big floating white Sonic glove that like was like, this way, moron. Like that would have been a really non-distracting, almost impossible to miss way to guide you. And knowing what to do is not what makes pinball hard, right? Like it's not like, oh, I don't know where to go, and that's why pinball is a difficult game. Even knowing like, oh, I need to do this like crazy trick shot, that's what's hard, is actually executing. So why obscure the information of what you need to do to proceed through the level? Because there is a kind of story. So why obscure that information by putting it where the score is, which you don't really care about, and where the jokes are, which you can choose to ignore while you were flying all over the place at 4 frames per second. So I'm with you. And like, I have many complaints in my notes about this specific thing. So I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah, no, it was just something where I was like, man, and I get that, you know, there's the, I guess we could, we'll need a better full name for this, but for right now, there's, you know, like a spectrum between, you know, giving you information so passively that it's basically like you're not getting the information at all. And so actively to the point where, you know, it's like taking the game almost away from you. You know, it's like the game's like mothering you. So let's just call it the Spinball to Navi spectrum, you know? And like, so, you know,
which is funny because I was thinking like the most hand-holdy games are the modern Zelda games minus Breath of the Wild. So yeah, using Navi as the extreme end of that spectrum, I think is apropos.
Yeah. So the Spinball Navi spectrum, like you want to like fall somewhere in the middle where you're feeding enough information and just like God and Futurama, you know, when you do things right, people shouldn't be sure you've done anything at all. And this game, well, I mean, I felt like it wasn't doing anything at all, so it got that part right. But
yes.
like there were definitely times where I was like, and I think that part of the frustration for me was there were times when I was trying to achieve bonus goals that I didn't need to achieve, you know? So I was like, which is harder. Like, you know, like the extra stuff is harder to achieve, as well it should be. But I'm like sitting there like bashing my head in trying to like achieve this specialty thing. And I didn't need to be doing that because realistically, I just needed to go to this other area. And then when I saw that it was flashing across the screen saying like, hey, go to this other area, I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah. And this is that, I think that kind of dovetails into something I noticed is every level has a handful of places where you can stand still. It's flat ground. You come up out of the Sonic ball and you stand there like normal Sonic, right? And the reason that stood out to me is because occasionally I was like, oh, I don't exactly know where to go. And I kind of want to like think for a second. And the reason I say it stood out to me for visuals is because I think they could have been lazy and said like, oh, you're never going to be still for very long, right? Like you're going to be flying all over the damn place at, you know, half of a frame per hour, and nobody's ever going to see what the world looks like because they're going to be so concentrated on what is happening, right? And responding to where Sonic is in relation to a few things like the flippers or enemies or a Chaos Emerald or the boss. But actually, they really... And I mean, the reason the frame rate grinds to a halt is because everything is super detailed. Like the water, and there's like a lot of toxic goo, and there's a lot of like electric things in the some of the later levels in like Factory. Like those things, like the little sparking animations and the shimmering animations are happening all the time. And the world looks super good. Like if you like that grungy, you know, Sonic 90s aesthetic, like everything is super, super detailed. Everything looks super awesome. And it's frustrating that with so much attention to how it looked, they didn't think about using the way it looked to inform, what's that thing? Gameplay, where They could have said like, oh, things that give you points will be red or have like a red outline, but things that are like, you must do these to proceed through the level will have like a green outline, something. So, or they'll blink, right? The things that are red are going to give you, raise your score, but the things that are red and flashing, like you're required to interact with those things, because there are things that I would bounce off of at 1,000,000 miles an hour and die horribly because it wasn't clear until it altered my trajectory that the thing wasn't part of the background, or it wasn't something that you would hang on to or swing onto, or that wouldn't just give you points, or that was a lever. Like, looking at things did not always clearly convey, especially at high speeds, did not always clearly convey, like, can I interact with this? Do I want to interact with this? Can I interact with this multiple times? Like, can I just keep hitting this over and over and I'll keep getting points? Or is this like a button or a lever? Like, it's just, for the amount of detail and love and craftsmanship they obviously put into the artwork, to have not gone the next step and thought about how that artwork would actually impact the game you're playing, the game this artwork is in, just feels like a serious miss.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like that, like they had, like one of the game designers, and they just loved the art. And so they were just like designing all this art, and they're like, so Al, I love all this artwork you've done. Does any of it actually inform gameplay? Oh, no, it doesn't, Al? Oh, well, all right. You know what? We got to ship this soon. And, you're the only developer on this, so we need you to move on to music just to get to, so,
That was a champion segue.
Thank you. Just happy with the work that Al and I have done so far today. Al's doing a lot of heavy lifting in this one.
He is. I mean, and knowing that he was the only developer on the artwork explains why Sonic looks like he was rushed through in 15 minutes and then never reapproached.
Exactly, because he had to move on to the musical score, man, because apparently he's the artist and musician and chief in charge of gameplay. And what else we've had him do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But
so my music notes, my notes in my notes about music notes are really a parallel to how I felt about the visuals, because the audio in this game is rock solid 90s Genesis. Like, it's grungy and everything sounds like electric guitar and like oh god, what do you call that, the music that sounds like it's being made with like factory equipment, where it's like industrial, right? Like, everything just sounds like industrial and gritty and like a lot of rock guitar. And I mean, I have a lot of nostalgia goggles for that kind of, or nostalgia headphones for that kind of music, right? Like, I think I might appreciate it anyway at this age, but I definitely know that I remember it fondly, right? And it takes me back to that time. That being said, all of the music, I think, like, knocks it out of the park, right? Like, and someone could say like, I don't really love these tunes, and that's fine, but I think the music is executed on very well. But just like they screwed up the way Sonic looks, they were like, well, we might as well make him sound wrong. So when you there are two sound effects that I would say Sonic is known for, because he doesn't speak in any of the early games, right? He has the spin dash noise. Well, three. There's the jump, right? The spin dash noise, and then the very distinctive Sonic stopping noise, right? Like, Sonic grinding to a halt so that he can reverse direction, or so he doesn't go careening off a cliff or whatever, is like, it's a really important part of what makes Sonic Sonic, right? It's like if you saw Mario and he had like a thick German accent, right? You would just be like, this person has a lovely speaking voice, but that's not what Mario is supposed to sound like, right?
Well, it's kind of like the Kevin Smith version of Superman, where like the guy said, I don't want him to wear a cape and I don't want him to be able to fly. And it's like, are we still talking about Superman? Because that's some pretty iconic stuff that you're cutting out. I mean, like, yeah, you could still make a Superman film, but if you took away that, and plus, like, fight, and also I want him to kill people. It's like, okay, now it's just random super powered alien.
Yeah. It's just there are certain things that I think can be expanded upon, can be played with and modified in ways that it's still obviously like you can trace its lineage back to however it sounded at first or however it sounded when it became iconic. This is not that. These are sound effects made by someone who has never heard what it sounded like in other Sonic games, because the jump is okay. That one is the least offensive, but the stopping noise sounds like tire rubber. Like it sounds like the way you would expect a driving game to make the sound of slamming on your brakes and the tires on the asphalt. That is not what Sonic sounds like when he stops quickly. The sound he make doesn't sound realistic at all. It's like a ludicrous, I couldn't even imitate it with my face mouth if I wanted to. It's like it's a cartoony sound. It's not cartoony tire screeching. It is a cartoon noise. Why do his shoes make that noise? I have no idea, but that is the sound they make. And what the sound that he makes in Sonic Spinball is just not even attempting to emulate that. So it's not like
it ain't in the same ballpark.
It ain't even in the same sport.
Bummer.
The spin dash is the same because actually for the opposite reason, which infuriates me now that I think about it, because the spin dash in real Sonic games sounds like a what would you call it, like a flywheel, like something you like pull a string, like the way you start a lawnmower.
That'd be pretty close.
Yeah, so it has like a very like buzz saw, like zzz, when you like charge up the spin dash. The spin dash in Sonic Spinball makes a cartoony like whoop noise, and it's like, you know what it is? Somebody left a Post-it note on Al's desk, and they were like, one of the sound effects is cartoony, and the other one is kind of realistic. And he had a 50-50 shot, and he just guessed wrong.
Well, yeah. Either that or like maybe he was like Beethoven, and he was like actually deaf, But he was just so good at like composing all of this music and stuff that they were like, oh, that is what it is. Because the music's so fun and catchy and good, but he's like deaf. But then they were like, okay, now we need you to do sound effects. And he's like, I literally don't know what this sounds like. So whoop,
music is math. I can do the math.
But I mean, and to Al's credit, I think that for somebody who's deaf, I think he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, in light of this new information about this fictional person we've made up, I retract my earlier criticisms out of respect for his family. It was really tragic the way he died.
It is. I mean, and also too, I think that he did a great job with the visuals as well, considering the fact that he did it all through Braille because he was blind as well,
But did he play a mean spinball?
Hard to say. But yeah, so all this is true. Yeah, so one of the things that I did say that on a positive note on the audio is that I felt that they did a good job giving an audio cue, at least in level 1, when you're standing in between the bumpers and that dragon going eat you.
Oh yeah, the you're about to drown, metaphor music.
Yeah, where all of a sudden it was like that intense, kind of thing. Like I felt that that was pretty nice, because if it was just the visual of the dragon like popping out, like it may be, my reaction time may have been slow enough that I would have just gotten like straight up got the first time. Oh, yeah. But like the fact that all of a sudden it's like, no, I was like, what the, I was just immediately like, oh God, get away from that. And then you see like the dragon like pop up and miss you, and you're like, oh, all right. I can get on board with that. So I did feel that they did a good job, at least there. And I feel like in a couple of other places, kind of alerting you to things that are about to happen through like intensive music. And yeah, like I said, like the music is very catchy, but yeah, the sound effects are, I don't know, like they feel, again, just kind of like the animation for Sonic, they feel to me, they felt like uncanny, where I'm like, something about this feels off.
So I felt like the Sonic sound effects felt really bad, right? For all the many reasons I just enumerated. But the world sound effects, I noticed because the visual theming in the 4 levels is completely different, right? There's nothing in common, just like you would kind of expect in like a platformer, right? Where each world has nothing in common with the world you just came from. In fact, was it in Sonic 3 that they actually, like, the first 20 feet of the level, you could see it bleeding into the theme for the next level?
Ooh.
Maybe that was Sonic and Knuckles.
Remember. I do remember that. I don't remember which game it
Yeah.
was. The main thing I remember from Sonic 3 was it was when they allowed Tails to go from mildly annoying to like truly devastatingly detrimental if you wanted to be.
Oh yeah, no, because you could grab Sonic out of the air and then drop him in a pit.
Yeah, where all of a sudden like Sonic could very easily become a versus game instead of a co-op.
Come to think of it, it honestly never occurred to me before that Sonic Spinball doesn't have like any downloadable characters or Game Genie characters or anything, but man, this game would have been way easier as Tails.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but I love that dorkly cartoon where it's like Tails is immortal,
Oh, yeah. Yes. He outlives everyone.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, like, no, Tails would have rocked this. I mean, it also would have been nice to like be Knuckles and be able to just like fly around, like just or glide or whatever he did.
Yeah, that was weird. Knuckles was weird. Anyway, the thing that I want to say about sound effects is because the visual theming is so different. One might expect that there would also be some differences in the sound effects, and there super are not. There certain like gameplay elements in terms of the world are unique because there's like, oh, this thing, like if it catches you, it holds you for a second and then it shoots you out. And that mechanic is only in that level. So that sound is only in that level. But switches, buttons, things like generic things that give you points, things that if you hit them more than one time, they will eventually break open and you probably need to do that on purpose. All of that information was very consistently delivered through audio and in a way that was appreciated because the visuals are often completely unhelpful. You either miss them or the frame rate has dropped to crap or the screen is bopping you around so fast that literally you just didn't see the animation. And so the fact that like if you hit something and it exploded, it makes a very distinct exploding noise. And it doesn't matter if that thing is made out of wood or metal or diamondylium or if it's a robot chicken, like everything makes the same exploding noise when it explodes. And everything, like every button makes the same button noise, even if it looks completely different. Every lever makes the same like little levery noise. And that actually, I think that's pretty good game design for like a platformer in general, but I feel like how incredibly strict they were about it, even when the sound effect 100% clashed with the visual, I think that was something they decided to keep truer to a real pinball game, right? Like bumpers in pinball always make the bumper noise and bells always make the bell noise. If the bell is painted to look like a little tree or if it looks like a Terminator, it still makes the little bell noise, right? And I felt like that actually helped me navigate the world pretty substantially.
Not only does it help you navigate the world well, but I think that it also services the aesthetic because I think that one thing I think this game did very visually, I mean, on all fronts, is it did a good job straddling the line between not just being, like we said before, a Terminator arcade pinball game where it's, whatever, but also to where it doesn't feel like bizarre that, like, how come I'm just controlling bumpers and then sometimes Sonic? Like, this doesn't make any sense, So the fact that they kept that also, I think, comes back to the aesthetic of, like, remember, it's a pinball game. So, you're hitting the bumper. It's going to make a bumper noise. It always makes the bumper noise. So you're like, yeah, because I'm playing pinball and Sonic a little bit. So I felt that it kind of tied into that well as well. But that's actually everything I have for audio. I don't know if you have anything else.
No, and this is actually as good a segue as any into controls and mechanics because my first note for visuals was, this is not how Sonic looks. And my first note for audio is, this is not how Sonic sounds. And my first note for controls is, you guessed it, this is not how Sonic moves. Like, he when he's on foot, which granted is very seldom, he spends the vast majority of his time not on foot. But when he is on foot, he is so unbelievably sluggish. He is so awkward. The animations have too many frames in them, so everything he does feels like all molassesy. He takes a really long time to get moving. His jump has this like long, deep, awkward wind up, like he's never bent his knees before. Like it's thank God there is no like large platforming sections where you're not in the pinball aesthetic, because that is not how Sonic moves. And it feels terrible. Like, it is actively uncomfortable to move him in those very small platforming sections.
Yes, agreed. And also, too, I think that it juxtaposes poorly with the speed of the rest of the game. Because when you are Sonic as Spinball, right? Like, you're firing around the world at a bajillion miles an hour, you know? And like then all of a sudden, like I would get to a platforming part, and I'd push right, and it'd just be like, all right. I was like, did Sonic? Because what I think happened, honestly, is that Sonic moved so quickly that like time dilated, but because it's a video game, it was like inversely. So Sonic actually aged faster than the rest of us, and so he became like older, and so thus. That fell apart on me. That entire thing got away from me. But anyway, the moral of the story
instead of gotta go fast, it's had to have gone fast.
Had to have gone fast in one of the many universes I have lived in. I can see through time. But so I mean, like it was just so bizarre. And so I think that I could have dealt with the sluggishness if it wasn't immediately juxtaposed by him actually moving very, very quickly through the pinball stage. It just really highlighted that. And speaking of speed, did you know you could change the speed in the options?
That sounds like a Switch thing, because I feel like I specifically opened the options for this game and then was like, oh, there aren't any. So, but I mean, please say more about this.
Well, I mean, so, and it wouldn't surprise me, and this is definitely something that we can do research on, but we won't, is I remember going into the options, because I that's something that I will forget to do from time to time, is like actually go into the options and be like, what can be done? And I remember seeing like, you can alter the speed, and I didn't think around with it too much because, I didn't want to, I wanted to play like the actual game. But I enjoyed that because I thought it was very similar to like Celeste's accessibility options, where it's just kind of like, all right, if this is moving too quickly for you, we can slow it down, because there were definitely some times where Sonic was moving so fast that like I'd hammer the bumper just because I was like panicked, so I could definitely see somebody who, had any sort of like motor control issues, or somebody whose game literacy is just straight up lower, or twitch reflexes or whatever. They're like, hey, I really want to play this game, but it is just moving way too fast. That being able to, it's just a very easy dial that you can turn down to kind of make it more accessible. So I appreciate that.
And that's something, because in most ways, this does play more like pinball than like a platformer, right? Like it straddles the line, but I would say it's like 65 pinball mechanics, right? Where the world behaves the way a pinball machine would behave. And you can't make a real pinball machine take it easy, right? So that's right. Something that's like a nice advantage for them to be able to say like, well, if you like the concept of pinball and you either suck at it, or you have some kind of, disability, or you just always dreamed of a chill pinball experience, then like you can, dial the speed down a little. I wonder if that was either like technologically infeasible, or if it just didn't occur to them when they were making the original game, because it probably would have helped that frame rate out a lot.
Well, that's the thing, is where I don't think it would be like a technological thing. I feel like it'd be pretty easy to say, make the game run slower. Making the game run faster, probably not.
Well, but if you're going to make the game run slower, then you really can't drop frames, right? So if the game would have been operating slower, but still dropping the same number of frames, it would just it would feel like it was broken because you just wouldn't appear to be moving, and then all of a sudden you would jump to another spot on the screen. When things are moving incredibly obscenely fast, then if it takes 3 frames for him to cover the entire length of the screen or the entire length of the level, you're just like, wow, I was going so fast. But if he takes 3 frames for him to cover the length of the level, but that takes 15 seconds, you're like, this is not fast. Had to gone fast.
So just because I want to really make sure that we touch on it, you want to talk about the cycle time?
Well, now you've got me curious, like what other crazy stuff they changed in the remake. So I thought, when I recommended you go this route to getting, a few extra classic games into your library, it genuinely did not occur to me that they would have changed anything, because I assumed that they took the lazy route of downloading an emulator off somebody's website and then just throwing it onto a Nintendo Switch cartridge and being like, $20, please. So the fact that there is this one difference now makes me curious about all the differences.
Obviously, we could just keep talking and try to figure it out. The only other thing that I can't remember whether or not this was in the original, but the rocket launcher. Was that?
Oh yeah, no. It's because Tails tries to come to your aid, and you shoot him with the rocket launcher, and it's very sad.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, it is. But they give Miles a good send off. So because I'll tell you what, they were picking him up for Miles after that.
All right. So in the OG, you have 3 balls and none continues. So if 3 of your balls drop, right? If there's 3 descended balls, watching you try to keep yourself together right now is maybe my favorite thing we've ever done on the show.
I am trying so hard to not be a freaking 5-year-old here.
Yeah, so if all 3 balls descend, then then you're done. You have to start over, as in from the beginning of the game, and you can get extra balls. I think with like 20 million points, like it's a lot, right? It's very in the spirit of a pinball game that is trying to eat your quarters. They're not generous with, hey, keep playing this game.
Yeah, because I remember, I finally beat the dumb scorpion Robotnik thing, and then
I'm sorry, this just didn't come up in sound effects. The noise that thing makes when you hit it, the blood curdling.
It makes you question the existence of a loving God.
It makes me positive there couldn't be one.
Right, because that noise ate him.
It's like, man, and that is a Genesis sound effect. No Nintendo game has ever had a sound effect like that. Like only Sega has the 3 balls to put that heart-shattering, mind-altering scream into a game and just expect you to deal with it.
It's that one extra ball that allows them to do what Nintendo don't. But the cycle time is because that's the thing is it is like a pinball game in the sense that it has that difficulty. It has all of that other sort of accoutrement that go with a pinball game, except for the fact that with a pinball game you're just playing for a high score. In this one there's some semblance of like plot and level design, and I get that it's. Like OG Sonic did like similar things where, like when you lost your 3 lives, you got kicked all the way back to the beginning. But it was way easier to get extra lives. And also, too, these stages themselves were not as like bananas difficult, So I got real frustrated when I finally got past, faith diminishing, screaming, scorpion Botnik, and then like got to the next level and then just did something dumb and died, just dumb mistake, wouldn't have made it again. And it was like
death comes for you easily. It's not like you only have three lives, but then the game is like, oh, well, we're going to put bumpers on everything so that you can't roll a strike or you can't roll a gutter ball. It's like, No, you only have 3 lives, and also death is constantly looming over you as, breathing down your neck. It's not that they weren't going for easy.
No, I mean it's like if it's like instead of at a bowling alley where you just bowl, and if you fail a couple times, they give you the superstar that lets you fly through the level, and they put the bumpers up. It's more like every time you roll a gutter ball, like you hear death like load 1 bullet into the chamber, and then and you just kind of like turn around and it's like, try again. I'm here for you, buddy. I got your back. And it's like, that's what I'm afraid of, So yeah, and that was the thing, is because, and we mentioned this in the pre-show, which is that you can tell you're getting older when your fear of missing out just like drops into the bucket, right? Yeah. For me, like I've noticed that I've started getting older because I don't rage quit, I apathy quit games now, like because this was a hard apathy quit where I like I just fell off the thing. It was like, all right, back to the beginning. I'm like, I don't care at all about any of it. And I just I think I just literally put my Switch down to just go get a snack and then come back to it and then just did anything else, and I came back, I was like, oh, the Switch turned off, I should probably charge it. And then I just didn't come back to it, and I was like, I've got enough notes. This will be fine.
Yeah, I think I get it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. So that's one of the issues. I mean, cycle times can definitely cause rage quits and all this sort of time. But that type of thing where like death comes really, really easy, it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, and the gameplay itself can be frustrating because unlike with Sonic where you just got to go fast and you can go through the thing, is the nuance with which the bumpers work is very similar to pinball. But literally, I remember at one point I was hammering myself up against a wall like 15 times and then finally got through. So the skill level that you have to have in order to progress and get back to where you were even relatively quickly is absurd. So, I was just kind of like the cycle time to me was just wildly unacceptable.
Well, and so there, you've spawned 2 thoughts I want to share with you there that are totally unrelated. Not only is the cycle time really brutal, but within a level, there's a starting point for the level, right? Like where you launch from, so to speak, right? Just like you would in a real pinball cabinet. But if you've opened a door or you've lowered a bridge or you've whatever, all of that gets undone unless you have touched a Chaos Emerald. The Chaos Emeralds function as the checkpoints, and a really generous thing.
Which they don't tell you.
What's that?
Which they don't tell you.
No, which they do not tell you at all. And something they could have done that might have been like a little generous is, touching a Chaos Emerald, not only is it a checkpoint, but you get an extra ball. Like, right? Because then that way, if you die, you start not only with that Chaos Emerald already collected, but you aren't, positive feedback looped into being that much more likely to fail, right? So it'd just be like a little bit of a nod to, we actually would appreciate it if you saw the end of this game we had Al make in a single weekend without ever seeing Sonic or hearing Sonic.
And that's the thing too, is that like because again, this is where I feel that they fell flat because they it's just kind of like with battle chess where they said like, oh well, we'll just make chess with animations. And it's like, yeah, you need to do more if you're porting a game over, or you're doing a game like this where they're like, oh, we'll make Sonic but Spinball. And it's like, yeah, but you can't have your hands like grabbing at the ball so hard that I feel the need to turn my head and cough. Like you need to just like give me a little bit so I can actually get through this game. I actually just did that whole thing so that way I could make that turn your head and cough.
No, that's good. I mean, it was bound to happen after all the setting up I did before. Anyway, the other thing that you made me think of a minute ago was something they don't go out of their way to communicate to you. I guess the fact that the first thing you do when you start the game is you have to physically walk the way Sonic would normally physically walk and like jump into where the flippers are and start getting bumped around. I suspect that action is trying to communicate to you, you can still control your trajectory in midair the way Sonic does. Make sure you understand that fact because it's going to matter a lot later, right? Like there are shots that are, you can either make an unbelievably, precisely timed, precisely angled, precisely, momentumed flipper bump where it sends you up and you bounce off this thing, they bounce off that other thing, and then you grab onto the ledge and you're like, haha, I made it. Or you can make an okay timed flipper bump and hold right or left, right? And like steer yourself a fair amount, especially over distance. You can steer yourself a lot. And if you are bouncing, because there's a lot of times where like, just like in a real pinball cabinet where you are bouncing wildly between the barriers, like the wall or the ceiling, and some item that will eventually explode if you hit it enough times, right? Knowing that you can control your trajectory a little bit is the difference between, oh, I hit it once or twice and now I have to do another precision flipper shot to get back up there, and hitting it 1,000 times and blowing it up in one go, right? This control really, really matters. Like this is absolutely integral to the difference between the game being like hard, but you feeling like you have agency, and it truly feeling like gambling, where you're just like, I am just the victim of the frame rate when I happen to hit the flipper button, and maybe I'll live and progress and get a Chaos Emerald, or maybe I'll get eaten by a dragon. Like it's just knowing that you can do those tiny little course corrections in midair matters so much.
Yes. No, it is 100% necessary. And I'm glad you brought it up because that was absolutely one of my notes. And, so, I mean, obviously you shouldn't be able to do that the same way that you shouldn't be able to arrest momentum at any point when you're in midair. But that being said, is that I think it is absolutely, because the game would be intolerable otherwise, especially if, when you like hit yourself like into an area and you're like slowly kind of like bouncing, if you didn't have anything to do, if you were just sitting there watching it,
like pinball,
you would lose your mind. And also one of the things that it did do that I found myself doing is it I don't know whether this was nostalgia or what have you, but like is it made it when I'd be like bouncing and like trying to eke myself like in the right direction, I would totally like lean, like we're like, come on. And so that actually I felt like added to some tension as well, because if that wasn't there, you would just be like, okay, well the bullets left the gun, I'm out, but like this way you're still, even when it's not just touching the bumper,
So I agree with you entirely that feeling like you are playing the game basically always, as opposed to just when Sonic comes into contact with the flippers, I think is important to video games in general. Like you shouldn't feel like you're on rails and you have nothing to do with the outcome, and you're just like, oh, like you said, the bullet has left the gun and now whatever happens, right? Like that's not, to me at least, that's not a good video game experience. That's a movie experience. Like I chose to watch this movie and now whatever happens, right?
So sorry. I have to share this with you. I was talking to one of our mutual friends recently, and we were talking because, obviously we do this thing, and we were talking about Final Fantasy X and whether or not the graphics held up, with the visuals held up. And I was like, I'd have to go back and double check it, but I feel like it would, like I feel like in my mind, and she said, well, she's like, the cutscenes definitely hold up. The in-between parts might not. And I was like, the in-between parts, the game. Like, so I really wanted to share that story. It's like, oh yeah, the cutscenes are great. The in-between parts aren't so much. It's like, it's just a movie. So to speak back to, yes, if it's, didn't mean to cut you off, but like, yeah, it is, if it's just like you fire it, and if it's a fire and forget, then the bulk of the game is movie.
Well, and I mean, that is the reason you made me think of this is because that is how a real pinball machine works, except that one of the things you can do with a real pinball machine is hit it.
Yep.
Right. And like to the point where they eventually had to incorporate sensors into the pinball machine. I think they're tilt sensors, right? Because people would literally physically lean the machine over as a way of cheating. And I think the fact that Sonic has some autonomy and agency and can like move in the world a little, one, that allowed them the freedom to have a level design where you need to move for the levels to be like mostly, winnable. But two, it does actually, in a weird way that I've never thought about before now, make it slightly truer to a physical pinball machine, right? Because a virtual pinball machine would have to give you like a tilt button, which wouldn't give you that like trying to finesse it like just a little bit, just a little bit more, right? Like, but the fact that you can arrest Sonic's momentum just slightly in midair, or like you can make him trudge slowly across the map for the few parts you have to platform through, like somehow that weirdly feels more true to a real physical meat space pinball machine, which is an odd realization I'm having.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of all I had for gameplay. I've got a couple of other minor things, but I wasn't sure if you had anything else meaty in that gameplay mechanics bag.
No, the only other thing I wanted to mention is just because I knew, because we, like you said, we were talking in the pre-show, like I knew you kind of flamed out at some point. You were just like, yep, I just didn't come anywhere close to beating it, right? And I mean, the game's super short. Like, it's 4 levels, but first off, the last level is absurdly long, and it's hard, right? Like, the game is just, it's a fairly hard, super unforgiving, fairly hard, super unforgiving game. And I wanted to reassure you that the ending is so unspectacular as to be completely forgettable. Like, even by Sonic game standards, the game basically just stops. Like, nice. And then you go to the same screen you see when you die, which is just like, where you are in the top scoring chart. So that there is like 2 seconds of animation where like the ship blows up, the real Robotnik is falling, Sonic is falling, Sonic gets caught by Tails on the plane, Robotnik falls, credits, right? Like it's super. I know the game doesn't have much of a story. I know Sonic games in general don't have stories, but this felt unspectacular even by those standards. Like, even amongst it,
there was no joy in the ending.
Not really. I mean, the last boss is actually a fairly interesting fight. So the mechanics of triumphing over the boss is pretty good, but the story conclusion, such that it is there, it would probably be better if it wasn't even there. If it was just like, boom, explosion, final score, right? Like,
yeah, man, you don't even get a cake baked for you.
No cakes at all.
Bummer. So basically, if you were told there was a cake, then the cake would in fact be a lie. But so in that case, in your mind, did it hold up?
So I have to give this a firm, well lubricated, nicely chained nostalgia monocle, because all of the things I didn't like about this game when I was a kid, they're still there. And I'm now aware of new things, right? that I didn't understand when I was a kid, that detract from the experience in some ways. But overall, is even as frustrating as it is, and even though it took me way more effort than I would like to admit to actually get all the way through, because I was like, I know I've beaten this game before. I want to beat it on this playthrough, right? So like, I did actually just bang my head against it until I beat it. And it probably took 20 sessions, right? Like, way more time than I would have liked to have committed to it, to be honest. But the game itself is actually pretty enjoyable. If you just had like unlimited lives, or if there was a continue system of some kind, like you can always continue at the same level, but you don't keep any Chaos Emeralds you'd collected, like something that just was like inviting you to keep playing instead of punishing you for having the hubris to keep playing, like that is what would move it into maybe no nostalgia goggles territory. And then for me, having played it on original hardware, and now having spoken to you, if you are going to play this game, please, for the love of God, play it on a PlayStation or PC or Switch, some modern re-release of a bunch of classic Genesis games, because the frame rate issue is very real and it sucks a lot of the joy out of it. Not the fun, but the joy. Like watching this beautiful artwork grind to a halt and Sonic be halfway clipped through a wall because the collision hasn't been detected yet just sucks a lot of the joy out of it. And that just like the whole time I was playing it, I was just like, I wish I didn't know that this was a thing it shouldn't be doing, because once that glass shatters, like you can't unsee it. So I'm comfortable with my nostalgia monocle, but I'm like, I feel like it could do more.
Yeah, no, I would also give it a nostalgia monocle for like kind of different reasons, similar but different reasons, which is to say that, I mean, the issue that I have is that I don't really care for pinball games personally. I find like pinball games
not a Windows 95 pinball game kid.
Oh, I mean, I played the hell out of that, but I had a sheer lack of anything else to do. I mean, it was either that or homework, and I mean, God knows I wasn't going to do that. Like, what are we, animals? But I mean, I always did homework, and then after doing shots of chocolate milk and going to bed at a reasonable hour,
I feel like the shots in that is what gives away that you're lying. Right? Like if someone just said like, no, I always did all my homework, then drank a glass of chocolate milk before going to bed at a reasonable hour. But I love that it's shots of chocolate milk, because someone would only say that if they knew the kinds of things you normally took shots of. It's a very clever way of revealing to the audience, like, I am also aware that this is a joke.
Yay. No, this is true. But no, so I'm not a huge fan of pinball games, but so by extension, I'm not a huge fan of this game. But that being said, is I do think that if you do kind of enjoy pinball games and you're like, but I want a fun twist on it, I think this game really kind of accomplishes that. Like the visuals are fun and interesting. The mechanics work generally well. The cycle time is soul crushing, but I mean, it's soul crushing on pinball. And especially if you kind of go into it, I would say that this game is great for if you plan on playing a game for like 20 to 45 minutes, because you can go in and just make peace with the fact that you are only going to ever see level 1. That's the game for you, and that's okay, because if you like pinball, then, you're used to playing one pinball machine, so you go in and you play that one pinball machine. I mean, so overall, I definitely think that I would give it a firm nostalgia monocle. It would be unfortunate for anybody just playing that one level, because then they wouldn't see all of the extra work that Al put into it. But I mean, I think that ultimately it was a passion project for him, because that deaf, dumb, and blind Al sure plays a mean pinball.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained. At the end of it all, gamers play what we play. for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the
Dun, 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 dun. Nicely done.
Thank you.